The candlelight on the table flickered gently, casting long shadows across the polished wine glasses and the untouched plates. The restaurant was quiet but refined. Mahogany beams, soft jazz in the background, a couple seated by the window laughing over their drinks. Claire sat across from Michael, her hand lightly resting near his. Her eyes, calm and trusting, mirrored a quiet kind of joy, the kind that did not need to be loud to be real. She leaned forward just a little, smiling. "You've barely touched your steak," she said softly. "Is something wrong?" Michael did not answer right away. His fork hovered in midair, then lowered slowly back to the plate. He looked tired, not physically, but the kind of tired that sits behind the eyes. His usually steady hands fidgeted with the cloth napkin on his lap. Claire tilted her head, concern knitting between her brows. "Michael?" He drew a slow breath, deeper than usual, and then exhaled like someone letting go of a held in truth. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice lower than the ambient hum around them. "And I need you to really listen." Claire nodded, unsure but steady. "I am here." He did not look at her. His gaze dropped to the white tablecloth. "It's the company," he said. "The numbers are worse than I thought. The contracts fell through, clients pulled out. We redrowning. I've mortgaged the house to keep payroll going. The bank is already knocking." A pause. Not dramatic, just heavy. "I might lose everything, Claire. The firm, the condo, the truck, everything." She sat frozen, lips slightly parted. The waiter approached silently, saw their expressions, and stepped away without a word. "I did not want to bring this up tonight," he continued, still not looking at her. "But it did not feel right hiding it either." He swallowed. "I just needed you to know what is coming, what we might be facing, what you might be facing if you stay." Claire's thoughts ran in loops. The engagement ring, still hidden in her drawer at home. The trip they planned for the fall. The new couch they argued over in the showroom and then bought anyway. She remembered the way he held her last week in the kitchen after a long day, forehead against hers, silent but safe. Now he looked small, smaller than she'd ever seen him. Shoulders curved inward, chin low. A man used to standing tall, now folding under the weight of his own words. "I understand," he said finally, and it nearly broke her. "If you need time, or space, or if this changes things for you." He reached for his glass, but did not drink. Just held it, knuckles white. Claire's gaze lingered on him, on the way his tie was slightly crooked, something he never let happen, on how his fingers trembled just a little, on how he was still wearing that old leather watch, the one his father gave him. She wanted to speak, to reassure, to say it would be fine, even if she did not know what fine meant anymore. But the words did not come. Not then. The quiet between them stretched, soft and tense like the last breath before a storm. They did not talk much on the drive home. Street lights passed in blurs, catching her face in glimpses, unreadable. Michael kept both hands on the wheel, his eyes fixed ahead, saying nothing except once, softly, "We might have to sell the place by winter." Claire nodded, but he did not see it. By the time they pulled into the underground garage, something inside her felt different. Not broken, just uncertain. The life she'd built in the last 2 years flickered like the candlelight on their table, steady but suddenly fragile. In bed that night, Michael lay with his back to her, shoulders tense. She did not reach for him, did not move. Her thoughts circled around what he said and what he did not say, around the parts of him he was trying to hide, around the weight he carried alone, even when she thought they were walking side by side. Sleep did not come easy, but something else did. A memory, faint but sharp. Her grandmother's porch swing in Alabama. The way it creaked when the breeze rolled in. The sound of cicadas at dusk. A voice saying, "If you really love someone, honey, you do not just stay for the sunshine." Claire stared at the ceiling in the dark, her chest tight. Somewhere deep inside, something began to stir. Not a decision. Not yet. But something. The gravel popped beneath the tires as Claire pulled off the 2-lane road and onto the familiar dirt driveway. The farmhouse stood just as she remembered it. White paint flaking from the wood siding. Porch swing tilted slightly to one side. Ivy curling up the posts like it had been waiting for her. It smelled like dry hay and chimney smoke, even in late spring. She killed the engine and sat for a moment, staring through the windshield. The silence here was thick, not empty but full, of insects, rustling leaves, and memories that did not ask permission to return. The screen door creaked open before she knocked. Ruby stood on the porch with a kitchen towel in one hand and flour dusted on her forearms. Her silver-gray hair was tied back, eyes sharp under a furrowed brow. She looked older, but not fragile, weather like something that had seen storms and still held its shape. "Well, ILLB," Ruby said, half smiling. "Did not expect to see you till Christmas, if that." Claire forced a smile. "Thought I'd drop by early this year." Ruby waved her inside like they had not lost 3 years between visits. No questions, no fuss, just the slam of the screen behind them and the scent of cornbread thick in the air. Inside, the house had not changed. The same quilt on the back of the couch. The same framed photo of Ruby and Claire's grandfather, smiling awkwardly on their wedding day, stuck in a crooked frame near the stairs. Claire's old boots still by the back door. She exhaled through her nose, quietly grateful for the things that stayed the same. They sat at the kitchen table with chipped mugs of coffee, neither saying much at first. Ruby sliced into a fresh peach cobbler, steam rising like a soft welcome. Claire took a bite and closed her eyes. Cinnamon, butter, something deeper than taste. Something like being 7 again. "You look tired," Ruby said, not unkindly. Claire did not deny it. It has been a week. Ruby nodded, sipped her coffee, and waited. She always had a way of letting silence work for her. Eventually, the words came out, halting at first, then tumbling. Claire told her about Michael, the dinner, the confession, the uncertainty. She did not cry, but her voice wavered once or twice. Ruby did not interrupt, just kept folding the dish towel in her lap, smoothing it flat. When Claire finally stopped, the room was quiet except for the ticking clock above the stove. Ruby leaned back in her chair. "Let me tell you a thing," she said, eyes narrowing just slightly. "When I met your granddad, he did not own a damn thing but a beat-up truck and 2 shirts that fit." Claire looked up. "Had a temper, too," Ruby added, lips twitching at the memory. "Worked the fields all day and drank too much on the weekends. Lord knows my mother warned me. Said he'd drag me down." Claire said nothing. "But I saw something in him," Ruby went on. "A kindness under all that rough. The kind of man who fixed fences without being asked. Who'd sit in the dirt with a sick dog all night just to keep it calm. I married that man with $10 in my pocket and my father's old Bible in my hand." She paused, tapping a finger gently on the table. "First 5 years were hard. We fought. We broke down. We patched things with tape and prayer. But we stuck. And by the time he passed, we'd built something no storm could touch." Claire stared at the peach cobbler, throat tight. "You think love is about smooth sailing?" Ruby shook her head. "It's about what you do when the boat has taken on water." Outside, a mockingbird sang from the clothesline. The sound felt clearer than anything Claire had heard in days. Later, she sat alone on the porch, wrapped in an old flannel blanket. The stars here looked closer, like you could reach out and rearrange them if you wanted. Her thoughts wandered, not to the money or the condo or the firm, but to Michael's hands on the steering wheel, his voice when he said he did not know how to keep going. She closed her eyes. The swing creaked gently beneath her, and somewhere deep in her chest, something that had been wound too tight finally began to loosen. Claire woke before the sun. The farmhouse windows were still dark, but the rooster had started his ritual calls out near the barn. She lay still for a moment, wrapped in a patchwork quilt, listening to the old house breathe. Floorboards shifted quietly, as if adjusting to a new day. She'd spent 3 nights here. 3 days of feeding chickens, chopping vegetables, hanging laundry on the line. Her hands were rawer than they'd been in years. Her hair smelled like smoke from a stove. And still, something inside her felt more whole than it had in weeks. Outside, the dew clung to the grass like silver threads. Claire stepped onto the porch barefoot, coffee in hand. Morning fog rolled in thin sheets over the hills. The swing swayed slightly in the breeze, creaking just once like a hello. She took a sip, letting the heat wake her slowly. Her fingers, wrapped around the mug, remembered other mornings, rushed ones, crowded subway rides, takeout breakfasts eaten behind the nurse station. She remembered Michael, too, how he always waited for her to unlock the door before heading off to his own battles in a world built of contracts and deadlines. He had not always been calm. He had his own shadows. Sometimes he worked himself raw. Sometimes he did not know how to speak the weight on his chest. But he had never once made her feel small. Not when she lost patience. Not when her own past came back in the middle of the night. Her mother's voice returned then, sharp and sudden like a slap. Do not trust the good times, honey. Any man can love you when it is easy. Claire closed her eyes. Her mother had stayed too long with the wrong kind of man. The kind who made promises with whiskey on his breath and broke them before the morning came. Claire remembered the way the dishes clattered when he yelled. The nights her mother sat on the porch with a bruise under one eye, whispering, "It'll all be different next week." Claire had sworn she'd never live that kind of life. She thought loving someone meant not settling for damage. But now, sitting here in the still of the morning, she understood something she had not before. There's a difference between being damaged and being afraid. Michael was not cruel. He was not reckless. He was afraid. Of failure. Of losing control. Of not being enough. She could see it now. The weight he carried not just for himself, but for her too. And he had tried, in his own broken way, to test whether she'd disappear when the shine wore off. She set the coffee down on the railing, hands steady. Her choice was not about saving him, or proving anything to anyone. It was not about being a martyr or chasing a fairy tale. It was about knowing who she was, and who he was, and deciding to walk forward anyway. She helped Ruby fix a broken shutter that afternoon, stood on a rickety step stool while Ruby steadied it with one hand and pointed instructions with the other. They did not speak of Michael again. They did not need to. That night, Claire packed slowly, folded her jeans with purpose, laid the blanket Ruby had given her, an old blue one with a tear in the corner, gently in the back seat of her car. She hugged Ruby hard at the doorway, longer than usual. The stars were out again, clearer than ever. You sure? Ruby asked, not doubting, just making space. Claire nodded. Yeah, I am sure. The drive back to Philadelphia stretched long and quiet, headlights carving through the dark. The city waited ahead, and with it, the unknown. But the fear that had once filled that silence was gone. She was not going back to comfort. She was not going back to security. She was going back to love. The key turned slowly in the lock, and the front door opened to a hush that felt heavier than silence. The condo had not changed. Sleek countertops, hardwood floors, the faint scent of cedar and cologne still lingering in the air. But the warmth was gone. Claire stepped inside, her footsteps echoing too loud in the stillness. The lights were off. Only the city outside flickered through the tall windows, casting fractured shadows across the furniture. A jacket lay crumpled on the back of a chair. An untouched glass of water sat on the counter, dust gathering around its base. She found him in the living room. Michael sat hunched in the armchair by the window, back curved, elbows on his knees. He did not turn as she entered. His shoulders looked smaller, like gravity had claimed more of him in the days she'd been gone. One hand hung loosely at his side, the other pressed to his forehead, as though trying to keep his thoughts from spilling out. Claire did not speak at first. She just stood there, watching him breathe, watching the rise and fall that somehow felt harder than it should be. When she finally stepped closer, her voice was calm. I am here. Michael startled slightly, lifting his head. His eyes were bloodshot, ringed with the kind of fatigue that sleep does not fix. He stared at her like he was not sure she was real. You came back, he said, and it sounded more like a question than a fact. I did. His mouth opened, but no words followed. He looked away, jaw clenching. You do not have to do this, he whispered. It is going to get worse. I say not fix this. I've already started selling everything. Your car, the accounts, the house might be next. She stepped closer, lowering herself in front of him, resting her hands lightly on his knees. You do not need to fix it. He looked down at her, eyes wet, confusion tightening his face. Claire, I did not come back for the house, she said, or the money, or the future we plan on paper. I came back because Yuri's still here, and that's what I want. Her voice did not shake. There was no grand speech, no trembling hands. Just a steady truth that filled the space between them. Michael blinked hard. His breath caught, and then, slowly he broke. His face crumpled, and he dropped his head into his hands. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the quiet unraveling of a man who'd been waiting too long to fall apart. Claire reached up and held his hands, letting him breathe, letting him cry without shame. After a long moment, he pulled back slightly, enough to meet her eyes. I lied, he said. Claire tilted her head, puzzled. There's no bankruptcy, he whispered. No creditos. No collapse. The company is fine. I made it up. She did not flinch. He took a breath, voice cracking. I was terrified. Every woman I've ever trusted, including my ex-wife, left when things got complicated, or stayed for the wrong reasons. I needed to know if you were here for me, not the life I gave you. Claire said nothing, but her eyes stayed locked on his. She did not look hurt, just still. It was a cruel thing to do, Michael added, shame thick in his voice. I see that now. I thought I was testing you, but really, I was trying to protect myself. And I almost lost you doing it. The air between them settled. Claire nodded slowly, then exhaled, her fingers tightening around his. You were scared, she said. So was I. But I am not anymore. Michael's chest heaved once, then again. He leaned forward until their foreheads touched, his hands gripping hers like they were the only thing anchoring him to the ground. I do not deserve you, he murmured. Claire closed her eyes. Maybe not, she whispered. But you have me anyway. The church stood at the edge of a cornfield, its white clapboard siding weathered by time, its bell tower leaning just slightly as if listening for hymns that had not been sung in years. Wildflowers bloomed along the fence, untamed and unarranged, and the gravel lot held more pickup trucks than sedans. There was no valet, no photographer crouching behind designer lenses, just folding chairs on the lawn and pie cooling on windowsills. Claire stood inside the tiny back room, her reflection caught in a dusty mirror propped on a shelf. Her dress was simple, cotton, lace-trimmed, hem just brushing her calves. Ruby had sewn the final stitches that morning, hands steady even as her voice cracked with pride. Claire wore no veil, no diamonds, just a ribbon in her hair and her mother's old locket resting above her collarbone. Through the window, she could see them gathering. Aunt May with her mason jar lemonade. The Jenkins boys kicking dust near the gate. Mrs. Halter fussing over the tablecloth that kept catching wind. And then, standing a little apart in a navy jacket that did not quite match his pants, was Michael. He was not polished. His hair curled slightly from the heat, and his tie looked like it had been knotted in the car. But he was smiling in a way that reached all the way into his shoulders. A kind of joy that no ceremony could stage. The music was just a fiddle and a half-broken piano someone managed to tune that morning. When Claire stepped through the doors, the congregation turned, not with gasps or phone flashes, but with warm eyes and real, slow smiles. Michael met her halfway, his hand outstretched. You sure? He whispered even now. Claire's fingers found his. I am. They stood before a wooden pulpit, daisies and a mason jar between them. The minister, an old friend of Ruby S., kept it short. No poetry. No speeches about soulmates. Just space for two people to say what mattered. Claire looked into Michael's eyes and spoke first. I do not vow to keep us rich or comfortable. I do not vow that we never struggle. But I promise to be beside you when things go wrong. I promise to reach for your hand when I am tired, and to let you reach for mine when you re-lost. I vow to build a life that can survive a storm. Michael swallowed, eyes glossy. I do not vow to give you everything, he said, voice low, but I promise to give you all I am. Not just the good parts, not just the days when I feel strong. I vow to be real, to be afraid, to be human with you. They did not exchange rings that cost thousands. Just plain gold bands Ruby had kept in a box since her own wedding. When Claire slipped hers on, it felt like something passed down, not bought but earned. When the minister declared them husband and wife, the crowd erupted, not with applause, but with whoops and whistles and the clatter of folding chairs tipping as people stood. Children ran circles around the steps. Ruby cried behind her hand, and Michael kissed Claire with the kind of relief that only comes when you realize you do not have to pretend anymore. The reception was held in the churchyard. Long tables under the open sky. Paper plates, homemade biscuits, fireflies blinking like fairy lights. No planer, no set list. Just laughter, stories, a pie contest Claire's cousin won by bribing the judges with extra whipped cream. Later that night, Claire sat on the porch swing beside Michael, her bare feet tucked beneath her. He leaned into her shoulder, still in that crooked tie, his fingers laced with hers. "I would not trade this for the world," he murmured. Claire smiled into the dark. "Good," she said, because the world never felt like enough. The morning after the wedding, sunlight spilled through the thin cotton curtains in Ruby's guest room. Claire stirred first, the scent of brewed coffee and turned soil drifting through the open window. Michael lay beside her, one arm draped across her waist, his breathing slow and steady. For a moment, she did not move, just listened to the quiet rhythm of a life that did not demand anything from them yet. They had traded five-star resorts for creaking floorboards and rooster alarms. No plane tickets, no champagne breakfasts, just Ruby's pancakes on chipped plates and a to-do list scrawled on a napkin. By mid-morning, Claire and Michael stood side by side in the garden, hands deep in the earth. He dug holes. She planted zinnias and marigolds, pressing them into the soil like blessings. Neither spoke much. They did not need to. The sound of shovels, the flutter of birdsong, and the occasional moo from a neighboring pasture filled the space better than words could. In the afternoons, they fixed the fence behind the barn, straightening posts that had leaned too long. Michael took off his shirt in the heat, revealing a back that had not seen labor in years. His hands blistered quickly, but he did not complain. He wiped sweat from his brow and smiled when Claire passed him a lemonade in a mason jar. They swept out the old hayloft, uncovering forgotten tools and a rusted tricycle Claire remembered riding down the driveway as a girl. At night, they sat on the porch with Ruby, snapping green beans while lightning bugs flickered like tiny lanterns across the yard. One evening, a neighbor's water heater burst, flooding their basement. Claire and Michael showed up with towels and buckets before the phone even rang. They spent the night hauling furniture and sharing chili from a crock pot, barefoot on the wet concrete. When they returned to the farmhouse after midnight, exhausted and sore, Michael laughed for the first time in days, deep and loud and unguarded. "This," he said, leaning against the porch railing, "this feels real." Claire looked at him, the dirt still under his fingernails, the crease of sunburn at his neck. She saw something in him she had not seen in months, a man not measured by net worth or polished charm, but by how he showed up when no one was looking. And he saw her too, not just the woman in the white dress, but the one who held broken things gently, who knew the weight of silence and the value of staying. They made love under the ceiling fan, windows open to the summer breeze, the old bed creaking like it approved. It was not glamorous, but it was theirs. Days passed slowly, and yet they felt full of small things that mattered. Shared work, shared meals, shared pauses under trees too wide to hug. Each night, Michael lay beside Claire and found sleep easier, his body learning the rhythm of days without armor. On their last morning, as they packed the truck, Ruby handed them a brown paper bag filled with canned preserves and advice they did not ask for, but would remember anyway. "You've already got what matters," she said, kissing Claire's cheek. "The rest is just seasoning." As they pulled away, the old road winding between pastures and fence posts, Claire reached for Michael's hand. He squeezed hers back, knuckles still raw, a smile playing in his sunburned cheeks. "Where to now?" he asked, eyes on the open road. Claire looked out the window, past the rows of corn, the distant hills, the sky too wide to measure. "Home," she said. "Wherever we build it next."